Organizations today face a fundamental shift. Being data-driven has moved from a competitive differentiator to basic survival requirement. Yet most organizations struggle to convert raw data into actionable insights, with fragmented collaboration and ambiguous ownership creating persistent roadblocks. That's why Dr. Duru Ahanotu, the leader of Tag1's data strategy team, has created the Insight Supply Chain Framework. It brings structure to how you organize your data professionals and teams to leverage your data and enable insights to flow throughout your organization. This is the third episode in our series on the framework. In our first episode, we provided a general overview, and in the second, we explored the critical decision between centralized and decentralized data teams. Today, we're diving into the data organization matrix, or DOM, and the strategic question as to whether or not data is or should be a core competency of your organization, and how that's going to impact the centralization versus decentralization decision. In future episodes, we're going to talk about how AI has been impacting Duru's thinking and do a deep dive on the data maturity curve and how your organization fits into it today and how you progress along it over time. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Tag1 Team Talks, the Tag1 Consulting Podcast. I'm Michael Meyers, the Managing Director at Tag1, and today I'm joined by Dr. Duru Ahanotu, the creator of the Insight Supply Chain Framework and the leader of Tag1's data strategy team. Duru, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here.
With 3 degrees from Stanford, including a PhD in management science and engineering, and an amazing career that ranges from building expert systems to diagnose manufacturing robots, to leading data science teams at Yahoo and Dictionary.com during their heydays, to helping our clients build and scale data ecosystems, Duru brings not only tremendous academic credentials, but real-world experience to help address and help you build these data ecosystems. And today we're going to highlight some of those real-world experiences and provide you with some examples as to how he's applied this framework across his career. Before we jump into the details on the supply chain, I want to give you a little bit of insight into Tag1. Tag1 is the number 2 all-time contributor to Drupal, which is the world's second most popular content management system. For nearly 20 years now, we've been the architects of the open web, leading the collaboration of the software and best practices. Tag1 is the number 2 all-time contributor to Drupal, the world's second most popular content management system. For nearly 20 years, we've been the architects of the open web, leading the collaboration of the software and best practices that power millions of websites and hundreds of thousands of organizations worldwide. We're a full-service strategic partner, applying that same architectural expertise across technologies and throughout your organization. From discovery and design to building and scaling complex applications, we lead AI strategy and implementation, design and manage infrastructure, and architect large-scale web applications across a wide range of platforms. We're trusted by industry leaders, including Google, Sumitomo, NTT Data, and the European Patent Office, to solve mission-critical challenges and build lasting solutions. Check out tag1.com to learn more about how we can help you. So, Duru, just to catch people up on episode 1 and 2, where we talked about, the framework as a whole, just like a high-level overview, and they got more to the centralization, versus decentralization. Can you just give us a quick summary? What is the challenge that organizations are facing, and how does your framework address those challenges? And, just really high level, why does it matter that decentralization versus centralization?
Yeah. So at a very high level, what I set out to solve or help solve is the challenge of how to best organize data professionals, both along their career paths and how to organize them as teams and groups in a way that will facilitate the best mode of collaboration amongst themselves and collaboration with the rest of the company in the service of delivering value through products and services to a marketplace. And what I saw in my career is that there often wasn't a lot of structured thinking about how to do this. And so the Insight Supply Chain came about from my own career experience in how I thought, what I thought was as the best framework for doing all of these things in a very effective way and in an efficient way that would allow people, data professionals in particular, to, best enjoy their work and also have strong and robust career paths. And so this came out of a lot of my experiences, and it's been constantly updated because this field changes a lot. And so I've learned also to make this robust through flexibility. And so it's been timeless in that sense. And it's, I've been able to apply it in my own work and also in my theoretical outlook on what's to come in the future with AI.
And what you've seen, consistently and clearly is that this framework has a big impact, right? Like
Mhm.
making decisions arbitrarily, not thinking them through, using a framework, taking brute force approach. None of these models come close to being, enabling you to be anywhere as effective, in taking
Right,
the data and turning it into decisions than what this framework enables you to do.
right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Um, yeah, I mean, you've said it all right there.
So
I don't have any much to add on that one.
you, today we're talking about the DOM, the data org matrix.
Mhm.
In my background, as an engineer, the document object model is what I think of, when I think of
I
the
know.
acronym DOM.
Yeah, I thought about that. Sorry, as a quick sidebar, I thought about that because I first learned about the DOM way back when working with an internet company. And I said, yeah, well, I'm just going to claim it as my own domain specific acronym.
I have no complaints, but I'm curious what, I had, until I had, started digging into this framework with you and learning more
Mm.
about it and using it with our
Hmm.
organizations. What is the data org matrix? I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that term.
Of
And
course.
how does it play into this?
Of course. So, the running joke from business schools and folks in consulting is that to explain any concept, you need a 2 by 2 matrix. And in working with actually a friend of mine a while back in terms of ma- figuring out how to best communicate these concepts, the 2 by 2 matrix just served the rule. So that's where the M comes from the matrix. Then the data org part, of course, is I wanted to speak to organizational principles. The insight supply chain started as a way of just describing a flow of data through an organization from raw data to the insights that, again, deliver value through products and services. But what was missing was, well, what are the implications for strategy in the company? What are the implications for organization? And so the data org matrix came about to serve all of those roles, to put it all in a neat summary, 2 by 2 summary, using the, again, decentralized, the decision of decentralized versus centralized as the core narrative. And then looking at how those two simple things, two simple pivot points, I should say, drive a very rich set of outcomes in your organization. So that's what my goal and intention was in building this matrix. And it just serves as a nice meme in a sense, in terms of communicating, what this is all about.
It's matrix inception because you have,
Yes.
we have the original 2 by 2, um, which, we've talked a lot about. Um,
Hmm.
how does, we're digging a level deeper, the initial matrix, the fundamental thing is whether or not you are decentralized versus centralized, and whether or not you have specialized or generalized resources that you're working with
Hmm.
across your organization. We're going a
Right.
level deeper here. Walk me through this matrix. How does each section apply? And how do I, leverage this?
Right. So with the 2 by 2, you have the axes of decentralized and centralized at the bottom. Sorry, that's the x-axis.
Mhm.
So centralized on the left, decentralized on the right. But then on the vertical axis, you have generalized versus specialized. And so that's the skill set. And so this is where the intersection is how are you going to hire or staff your people? Is it going to be a broad, people are going to have broad skill sets or very specialized? And then again, how are you going to organize them? Are you going to organize them in one place or are you going to distribute them across the organization? So now if we want to see how this plays out, we can pick any part of this matrix. So let's take one of the simpler ones, which is the upper left. which is the centralized interdependent business units. So what that means is that you're going to make a centralized team, set of data professionals, and then the business units that they serve are going to be interdependent through their need for the centralized data team services.
Mhm.
Then the skill set, when it's generalized, well, that means what you have is a business that, may be very mature. It's maybe the business doesn't change that much. And so the standardization that you need is just making sure the data pipelines are running and they're robust. And when people are doing their weekly, monthly, periodic reporting, the reports are ready, right?
Mhm.
So that's like the basic bread and butter data service model, right? So again, centralized data team, and you have generalized skill sets because you're just focused on a business that just needs the basics of out of their data. And then if you want, I could go through all the different parts of the quadrants, or maybe you want, there's a specific flavor that you want to address. It can go either way.
Yeah, I don't know if we should go in, increasing complexity or, is this like part of the data maturity curve or,
Mhm.
like, is there a logical next place you would be, or is it just, dependent upon where you're at as an organization?
Yeah, well, let's take the next step in the complexity. And yeah, so it's not in the graphic. I will refer to the data maturity curve occasionally. It's not directly integrated in here because the data maturity curve kind of is like this environmental variable in the background. And you could be in any one of these quadrants and be going up the data maturity curve. So it's not a direct dependency in a sense. But so, for instance, if I'm taking the next step of complexity, this is where this question of, hey, is data going to be a core competence for your business comes in?
Mhm.
So the next stage of complexity would be, yes, I'm centralized in terms of my data professionals, but now I need specialists
Mhm.
I need specialized data professionals because data is going to must be a core competence of my business. And it's because either I'm delivering data as a service or product, or data is an integral part of making my services and products successful. And what does specialized mean? So if we think about the insight supply chain and the very basic, roles, the three-part roles, the data engineering, the data analysts, and the insights analysts. So when I say specialize, I'm saying I'm going to hire people who specifically are experts, deep experts in data engineering. They're deep experts in data analytics, and they're deep experts in insights analytics. And let me just talk a little about the insights analytics because this is a term that came out of my work some time ago. So people probably haven't heard this term before. But think of insights analysts as folks who are really um, expert in the business and know how to take the work of data analysts, whether it's their own or someone else's, and really evangelize a particular decision based on the data and the evidence that's been produced. And so they can talk directly to executives. They can make the data plain and clear. They don't use data professional jargon to get their point across, right? They can do that translation layer very quickly, and they're very good at promoting results, right? And they can do visualizations in dramatic and coherent, clear and crisp ways.
Mhm.
So that's the insights analyst. So if I have data as a core competence, so you can think of, let's just talk about that last part of the insights supply chain, which is the insights analyst. That person could be, for instance, the person who has a crystal clear vision of how this product or service speaks to the marketplace. And I'm going to take the data um, that supports this product or service, and I'm going to make it plain. We're going to make it plain in the customer's language, or I'm going to make it plain in the company leadership's language. And so that's the next level of complexity because now I have these specialists. I'm going to have to think about career paths for different types of data professionals. Again, I always come back to this self-interested thing, which is I want to make sure data professionals are being taken care of. And I have to think about how they collaborate together,
Mhm.
to be an effective team. Because again, this is the centralized model. So they are collaborating across specialties. And I have to make sure that they're able to communicate with each other in very effective ways.
I'm sitting here wondering, how is data like how is it that is data a core competence a question in today's world, right? Like, um,
Yes.
it like what? Like, like, isn't the answer yes?
Well, okay. So, there's a long history to this term, even core competence, right? I remember it was really big in the 1990s that, hey, every company needs to have a core competence and they need to focus in on what that is and then cut the rest of the organization off, right? Um, so I think now we have a more nuanced understanding of what core competence means. So for instance, back in the 90s, if I told you my company's data is a core competence of my company, you might advise a company, okay, get rid of all the other functions and then focus on creating data or data products and data services. But that's not quite what we mean today. What we mean is that data as a core competence means that if you don't professionalize in the sense this your data functions, then you are not going to be successful in the marketplace. And you may be undercut by competitors who do take data seriously as a strategic, object, or I don't want to use the word weapon, but a strategic lever, right, for the business. That's another way of thinking about it is the data as a core competence doesn't mean it's the only thing you do. It means that it is a very important strategic lever for the success of your business. So yes, now today we say, well, duh, of course data is a core competence because data is everywhere, right? We have big data. Well, we went through there big data, and now it's AI. I think AI in particular is going to make this question very salient, and more than ever, just about every organization will have to say yes, because you're not going to just be able to sprinkle AI on your business and then make magic happen. You actually have to make sure that your data is well governed, high quality, it's structured or unstructured with intention, such that the AI can make a good sense of it. And there's, that's a whole discipline in of itself, but still the inside supply chain still speaks to that necessity, right? Again, with the different roles and functions along the path.
I mean, the unfortunate reality is, like, joking aside, data
Hmm.
should be a core competency for a lot of organization, and it isn't because of, everything from, where your professionals are and your inability to properly address and structure that and what we're talking about
Hmm.
here to related problems, like the fact that you adopted all of these SaaS tools and they're sprinkled across your organization and they don't talk to each other and you can't really leverage your data in a way that you want. And
Yeah.
AI isn't yet fixing that and may not for some long, so it's like,
Hmm.
it's not just, you know, and I guess that brings me to like something else that's in the back of my mind with respect to this. I'm a, eat my cake and have it too kind of personality. I want it all. I'm looking at this saying, well, that upper left quadrant, like that seems like table stakes. Like I got to have those pipelines in place for my business to enable people to function. But I
Hmm.
also want to, move more towards, that lower left, if I'm up there, is it one or the other? Do you, certainly you might shift over time, but can you exist in a world where you have both of these in place?
Yeah. So actually I have two thoughts that come to mind. One is that we're making an allusion to the data maturity curve, right? And as I said, it's always this sort of environmental variable that comes up when you're talking about what kind of states exist in the organization at any one time. And yes, you could have different parts of the organization at different levels of maturity because you just have different needs that are across the business, right? So your business may not be a big monolith. You may have the cash cow. In fact, let's talk about it um, in terms of like a cash cow, a legacy business that does move slowly. Everyone understands exactly what needs to be done. You just turn the crank, turn the products out, and boom, you make sales. And then you have other parts of the business, companies like Google, of course, and Facebook or Meta platforms understand this. You have other parts of the business that are much more innovative and they are moving fast. They have to create and destroy products and ideas at a rapid pace. That can exist in the same company as, let's just say, I think, Google's case, the cash cow would be the search business, right? And not to cast any aspersions, I'm not calling Google search slow and, and plotty. I don't work there, so I don't know. We're just using as an example. But you know that Google, in fact, they went through that restructuring and called themselves Alphabet because they recognized that they have this cash cow, but then they have to be purposeful and intentional about all these other businesses and opportunities that they're incubating. I mean, I can imagine in those other smaller organizations that they're incubating that they have a lot of um, uh, specialists that are data specialists that are working hard to advance up the data maturity curve as fast as possible and making data a core competence of these uh, new emerging businesses. And so, yeah, you can have different parts of the business moving at different speeds because you have different product lines and different services and different marketplaces that you're serving. It's not a one size fits all when you have a very diverse portfolio, right?
We do a bunch of work with Google, but not with the search team. So you can say whatever you want.
All
So
right.
I, you can see a distinct difference between our personalities. You see the data maturity curve. You called it an environmental variable a few times now. I would call it an existential crisis.
That's fine too.
Um, I,
And
uh,
and
I,
as a existential crisis, right? That's where our opportunity is to help organizations succeed and do better, right? When we can see where those crises are and the pressure points that are creating those crises. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to our episodes on the data maturity curve. I think it's a really interesting model. You know, if people aren't familiar with it, it would really help them to understand it better. Um, so we've covered the top left, the bottom left.
Mhm.
What, what's the next step, or where do you want to go from here?
Yeah. So let's get another level of complexity, right? And this is the case where we're in the bottom right, and this is the case where we're now decentralizing. Um, and we have specialists, and we've decided data is a core competence. Now, in this case, what you may have is a lot of data scientists, for instance, in various parts of the company. And these data scientists, think of them again in terms of inside supply chain, are serving like the insights analysts who speak the business, but also can organize the data. Who know how to analyze the data, build models and algorithms and so on, but they do it in the language of whatever particular vertical or product and service offerings that they're working on. And that a term that I've come to learn recently that I really love is this artisanal aspect to the work, right? And for those who aren't familiar, an artisan is very specialized. You can think about it in the old days, they were the craftspeople who had very specialized skills that took years to hone. They may have been served as an apprentice, right? And they learned by doing. And so they have their skill sets are very specifically tuned to solve problems in a particular domain. And in this case, when we're talking about the business, they're solving problems specific to a set of products or services. And so in this case, they are specialized because they're data scientists, but then we may have specialists with data engineers because we don't want the data scientists to spend too much time building pipelines and doing the data governance and all that kind of stuff. Now, the fantastic thing about this new world is that there are more and more tools that are blurring some of these lines and enabling data engineers to, function as data scientists and data scientists to function more as data engineers. So that's how we come up with terms now like analytics engineers who, are kind of bridges along this line. But anyway, long story short, um, this is where you're specifically trying to monetize your data. So data is a core competence. You're trying to monetize your data in a specific way by creating data products. Again, all of our big tech firms, we know them well. We know that they are collecting data as a specific product. And their customers are very specialized sometimes in non-overlapping verticals. Um, and and they have to move rapidly. These individual verticals have to move fast because they have competitors that are constantly innovating. Um, and when you have that fast-paced environment, having people who have generalized skills may not help because, you need specialists let me say it a different way. Um, Innovation and creativity moves fastest when you have deep set of skills in a particular domain. And that's what we call specialists. But you need to have a structure around them such that they could communicate their innovative and creative ideas effectively so that they make it out into the organization. So it's no good if you're very good at a particular thing, but you can't integrate it into the rest of the business. Um, and so that's why in this case, the decentralized model exists, because you need to integrate those specialists with the business folks, and they can work well together and move fast. So sorry, that was a long answer to your original question, but there's a lot here. We stepped up complexity. And the more and more complex you get, the more fluidly you have to think about how you're organizing the teams, the data professionals.
Yeah. I mean, we could do an entire episode just on this, one quadrant, where we're trying to get an
Yes.
overview. But I
Yeah.
love the way you described it. My background in startups, I think about how you drive innovation in environments.
Mhm.
And this quadrant speaks directly to that, right? You want to have
Right.
specialists, throughout your organization to drive innovation, not to be, held back by the organization as a whole. It makes a lot of sense to me why this model, like to me, this helps illustrate, from my background and context, why it's so important to follow a model like this and how it can clearly define success and failure, or you need to brute force things. You really do fit into an aspect of this for, parts of your business at least.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to start referring to I'm going to share my artisanal spreadsheet with you, and I got to find ways to work that into my vocabulary. I love that.
I know. I just love that word. And it's a great way of honoring the past in terms of how people, develop skills in the workplace. Yeah.
I love it. So that leaves us with the upper right.
Yeah. So the upper right, you notice what I was saying is sort of this linear increase in complexity. And so the upper right is not necessarily the increase in complexity, because it's, again, the folks in this model are generalized,
Mhm.
but they are decentralized in business units, and data is not a core competency. But the complexity here is generalists to move fast enough with the business, right? So, um, the emphasis for these individual business units will be, um, they need to address certain business problems, marketplace problems as fast as possible.
Mhm.
Um, and they don't need to innovate in the data realm per se, but they do need folks who know data and can offload the work of data from the other people in the businesses. We talked about earlier the sales, marketing, operations, finance, HR, and whatnot. So the generalists know enough to help folks, but they don't have to be specialists in a particular data domain, because the data is not a core competence in this particular case. Now, as we discussed earlier or inferred earlier, this upper right quadrant is probably going to become less and less relevant over time, right? Just because in some form or fashion, data is going to be a core competence of any fast moving organization.
Yeah. Um, but I wonder, you go back to how everyone's becoming an analyst, you know,
Hmm.
uh, perhaps some portion of your organization might fit into that. I don't know, because another thing we talked about is you can just as easily extrapolate and make bad decisions from data. The idea that,
Oh, yeah.
you
Very
know,
easy.
yeah. So empowering everybody to make decisions based on data is both great, but, something that needs to be checked, and having data professionals, generalized support to help a broader army of analysts, that could be the mainstay, the bedrock of every organization, that have to have that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I can envision a world where there's a role called the data coach. Let's just call that person the data coach. They could act like a consultant for all the folks that are using data. We earlier talked about data users. My favorite example is finance, because in a startup situation and in a big company situation, I often found the folks in finance to be the most savvy of the data user in the data user class, who are not themselves data professionals. Um, but because they have to, they're all about the books and making sure the money's flowing and all that kind of stuff, they don't have time to build out pipelines and make data, you know, a big part of their job, but they are savvy enough because they deal with numbers all the time. They understand the concepts of trends and correlations and all the kind of stuff, statistics, all the kind of stuff that we data professionals deal with. And so in that case, you have a very savvy data user. So you could just serve as a data coach and trust that they can run with the tools that you give them, that make their life easier. Whereas, again, I'm speaking from my own experience. I won't mention any specific companies, but whereas in marketing, for instance, you have data users who they don't have time, they don't have the compunction, so to speak, to crunch numbers, right? And to go through and figure out. And I'm not talking about marketing analysts. So all you marketing analysts out there, I'm not talking about you, of course, because that's again a very specialized role. I'm talking about the general marketing organization. So the general marketing organization may have marketing analysts. You've seen that role before, right? Because they are offloading a lot of the data user stuff that marketing has. Or if they don't have marketing analysts, then again, they're relying on the data professionals in a centralized team, or whether it's within marketing or whether it's in the organization. Anyway, all that to say is, in this data coach example, you can dial up or dial down the amount of collaboration that you need to do depending upon the savviness of the user you're dealing with. Always cognizant, though, that the organization should always be cognizant of what, again, career path are you creating? So are you incentivizing your marketing, your sales, your finance folks in their performance reviews? Are you evaluating how effectively they use data? Then the data coach will need to dial their support accordingly, because this person is being judged on how well they use data, and not just how well they use me data professional as a resource.
I
Very fluid.
yeah. As more and more of your organization, becomes analysts in their day-to-day function. We talked about this a little in the previous episode. It's critical that you complement and support them with data professionals. And so, as the analysis component grows, it's not replacing professionals. It's, if anything, increasing the need for professionals to make sure that your, quote unquote, army of analysts are effectively utilizing that data, making decisions with it that are,
Yep.
going to lead to value and not, serious problems.
Yep. Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things that I'm wondering is, I'm an organization that wants to use this framework. Is it aspirational? And by that, I mean, do I look at where I want to be, or do I look at where I am today when I try and figure out how to organize my organization?
Yeah. So this comes down to organizational strategy, right? So you should always understand where you want to be. You should always understand where you are, and then be able to assess the gap between those two. And I think, again, as we were alluding to before, almost no matter where you think you are in terms of data as a core competency, you can look ahead in the future and anticipate that to some extent data is going to be a core competency. And then this entire matrix, the bottom of this matrix is what's going to apply to you. So you may be at the top part of the matrix, but you should be thinking about, over the time, you're going to have to move yourself to the bottom. Again, whether it's the centralized organizational model or the decentralized model, you are going to need some level of specialization when data is the core competence. And again, I know we'll talk about this in a future episode. AI adds another interesting layer to this question, because what people are going to try to do is make AI the data specialist. And there are all sorts of trapdoors if that's the approach you're going to make in terms of, creating a core competency in data. And there'll be all sorts of blind spots, because you're not taking advantage of the experience and the training of data professionals who can spot gaps. They can do verification, they could do validation of errors, and they can also help people use the tool effectively given the context of what the data ecosystem itself looks like. That's the way I think about it. Yeah.
One of the things that stuck with me from the first episode, you talked about how SQL is to be the holy grail, to enable non-technical people
Oh, I
to
love that one. Yeah.
reach out like 50 years later.
Here we are.
You have to be an engineer. But it was a meaningful step forward, and AI, as it is today and will be over the next couple of years, is a meaningful step forward, and it does enable organizations and, especially people at small organizations, they're able to do more than they were before.
Mhm.
But it just keeps coming back to, the need to have, real data professionals, to think about the way you structure your organization, to empower your larger teams, to make sense of your data, and your systems. That's another thing that we haven't
Right.
talked too much about, but like, all these different systems and enabling you to, have them talk to each other, to be able to leverage your data. There are all sorts of problems that organizations face that data
Mhm.
professionals are core to solving. Um,
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is, we are in this now era of agentic AI. I mean, every year people are pushing these new faddish terms, and soon there will be armies of agents, AI agents. And who in the world is actually going to be on top of managing how and whether these things are all collaborating effectively, right? I contend it's going to be some flavor of a data professional that's going to be tasked with making sure that these AI agents are collaborating effectively and effectively um, for the organization. Um, I could see someone right now thinking, well, couldn't I just build the AI agent of all agents to manage all of the army? I was like, no, don't do that.
I think we're
You can't
still,
just hand over the keys to the kingdom and then, go away and expect profits to be piled up at the end of the year. No, it's not. Again, if we talk about the Holy Grail, that's, I think, what is in the back of some people's minds, but be very careful.
yeah, I think a human in the loop strategy is really important.
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to our upcoming episode on AI, as it relates to all of this. And uh,
Hmm.
I really want to dig into the data maturity curve. I think that's going to turn into more than one episode because there's so much going on
Sure.
there.
Yep.
But I really appreciate your digging more into the document object model. I mean
Freudian
the
slip, so to speak.
the the data org matrix, and for talking more about the framework. For everybody who tuned in, thank you so much for listening. You can check out past episodes on the framework, as well as other topics at tag1.com/podcast. We'd love your input and feedback. If you have questions about the framework, we'd be happy to answer them. You can reach us at info@tag1.com. And of course, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future conversations. Special thanks to Tracy Cooper and June Gregg for producing today's episode, with input from Hank Van Zyl and Casey Bowden. Until next time, take care. Awesome.